What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another, hopefully, spectacular episode of the Surf and Sales podcast. I'm one of your two co pilots for today's episode. My name is Scott Leese, co founder of the Surf and Sales Summit, here with my good friend and partner and co founder, Richard Harris. What's going on, dude? How are you?
I'm tired, man. My mom came into town last night, so you know what that's
That'll
like.
wear anybody out.
Yeah,
That's
she
that's
just got here, and I'm already tired.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
When does she fly
so
home?
Saturday, so she's here for the week.
Oh
Which,
man.
look, I love my mom, but Scott, you and I both have a similar thing where Fish and family have one thing in common, which is after 3 days they both start to stink.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
but
Well,
I'm
I
glad to see
wish.
her. I haven't seen her in a long time, and the boys are glad to see her. So, but that's the big news.
Hmm. Well, I'm sending you all sorts of support, Richard. You can
I,
emotionally, I think you can get through this. I hope and pray. I hope and pray. We
yeah,
are brought to you today by a couple sponsors, the first of whom I'll announce. Richard will cover the second one. The first one is the Tech Sales Accelerator, led by my friend Chris Bussing. He talks about how to launch your six-figure tech sales career in 2024 and beyond without prior experience or a college degree. Check out the Sales Accelerator. It's a collection of courses that give you a blueprint for landing your first SDR role at any tech company that you love. And Richard, tell everybody
yeah.
about Peel.
Well, this is one that I'm surprised Scott didn't know about before I did, and maybe you did, but because you talk about this all the time, like by 2030, right? It's about to be 2025. In 5 years, allegedly 90% of all decision makers are going to be Gen Z or millennials.
Isn't that wild?
We are going to be forced out,
Yeah.
right? We're going to age out.
Yeah.
And obviously with AI and the efficiency of everything, that's all going to change. I know you talk about this all the time. Like nobody's going to answer the phone. Our kids never answer the phone. They only
No.
respond to texts. So
Barely.
yeah. So our sponsor is Peel.ai. You can get them at Peel.ai, GETPEEL.ai. They've got conversational AI that really enables companies to meet the buyers right where the buyers want to be met, whether it's in a chatbot or other means of communication. So please check out getpeel.ai. And now on over to our guest. Scott, I'll let you introduce Chris.
Yeah. The main reason we're here talking to a senior consultant and unit lead coaching at the Sales Playbook. He talks a lot about building and scaling sales quickly from 0 to 10 million euros, USD, whatever, it doesn't matter. He's from Berlin, Germany. His name is Chris Karger. Welcome to the show, man.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Appreciate the invite and
Yeah,
looking forward to what we're going to discuss.
yeah, we love having you here, specifically because you're probably the first Surf and Sales podcast fan or listener that we ever had, ever. Tell
No,
tell everybody tell
Wait,
everybody a little bit about how
even
you heard
before
about this.
even before your mom, Scott, even before her, because she's been a very
ooh,
big fan.
Before her, before
Okay,
her.
no,
that's
no,
probably because you didn't tell your mother you were doing
I
it.
didn't tell her I was doing this. That's right.
That's
no, it's actually kind of funny because when I was preparing for my first leadership role, which was end of 2019, so starting beginning of 2020, and I was looking for resources how to start. Actually, Servant Sales podcast just dropped the first episodes, and I remember I was moving at the time. I remember I was binge listening to episodes when I was staying at IKEA, buying furniture, and really like making notes in between of like how to best start in my new role. Um, well, no, a few years later, a couple of startups later, um, yeah, I appreciate to be here, and I think it's a great opportunity to maybe give something back to others, to the community that you built. I think
Yeah.
it's amazing. Um, on the same note, maybe also thank you because I remember that you, Richard, spoke a lot about mental health when I needed help, and this encouraged me a lot. And I know I reached out to you, Scott, in the same time when I started my into leadership, just dropping you a note. And I know now when I look at my inbox how full it is, that you take the time to respond to those is incredible. So glad to be here.
Yeah. Right
awesome.
on.
Awesome. I
Well,
have a question.
go
I have
ahead,
a
Richard. You go
Yeah.
first.
Apparently I need to talk more because I'm not
Yeah.
talking
It's your
enough to my
turn.
mother. Um, so you do business, mostly in the US or in the EU? Where do you do most of your business? Or is it even?
No, so it depends on the position that you're talking about. Right now, as a consultant, it's mainly in Germany, Switzerland, a little bit of Austria, um, some European countries left and right, but that's the focus is really the DACH region.
So
Before that, it was mainly DACH, but when I was in mid-market for company called Booking Kit, I was managing the European sales team.
so my question is, because I get this all the time of, what are the cultural differences? So in sales, right? Like it's a big topic, right? Like people don't
It
know.
is.
And my first answer is, why are you asking me? Go ask Google, because someone's probably written about it. Like, I'll tell you what I think. But I'm curious, to someone who does do things in countries that I don't spend a lot of time doing business in, a little bit here and there, are the cultural differences that big, or is it the communication style is different?
I think it's mainly the communication style, but it also comes down to cultural elements. I actually experienced this firsthand when I was at a company called Tickets Group, later acquired by Eventbrite. And Eventbrite, obviously, probably the most familiar company for people that are listening from the US, was at the time expanding into Europe. And the one thing I think that many companies get wrong in the US, oh, we have a playbook. Let's put it in Google Translate, hit send, and they can do outreach in German, and they have everything written out, and it's not working like that. So the culture is different for sure. It's even different between, I don't want to say the Netherlands and Germany, but I can't imagine actually that the culture in Texas is the same in California or in, I don't know, Wyoming.
Mm-hmm. Very different, very different.
So,
but I think it's, interestingly enough, the things that I always come down to is that it's communication style, right? How you say things and what you say that can be relatable. Ultimately, it's still always getting to the truth, right? And you have to sort of figure out the way to communicate that level of truth in a way that person wants to hear it in a certain culture, right? You can't just sort of go all in, like Scott would as a brazen Texas American, as he is now officially. So, he goes all yeehaw in there, and so
no, fair enough. But so the second example, we had a manager at the time, COO, who was coming in. We were not on target for the quarter, and he said, "Well, why don't you just tell your customers that you need this deal right now to close your quarter strong?" I don't know if that's common in the US. It seemed like to us that it's the most common thing to do it there. In Germany, you would never do that. Like you can do it as a joke if you really know your prospect well, and or like you know your relationship is strong enough to.
Just to be clear, nobody should do that here in America either.
Right.
Just to be clear.
Okay. Good that we got.
But I have. Listen, we've all heard people do that. We've all heard people do that, and you shouldn't do it. But we've heard it before. Yeah.
But no, there's cultural differences, mostly, I think, in the level of communication, in the level of how direct you can communicate certain things or how polite you should be. And in the end, I think it's mainly language that is different. I mean, you can not just translate something. Something probably needs to have a certain phrase or certain meaning, or the way you transport your messages might be different.
Is there anything inherently harder about scaling from 0 to 10 million in Europe versus scaling from 0 to 10 million in America, let's say?
I have not scaled a company from 0 to 10 million in the US, so I cannot answer that question. To be fair, it is. I think it's different if you look at your total addressable market, and even around you, if you want to expand to different countries, every country has a different language. Every country has a different culture. So in regards of that, it might be different. Because it seems easier to have 350 million people that all speak the same language and kind of go back to the same.
It seems more challenging to me to do it in Europe, specifically for the reason that you just called out. But I also wonder if it's harder because there's less support system, there's less infrastructure, there's less other people who've been there, done that successfully. The investor community is smaller. So there's maybe less resources historically been available to people, although I think that's starting to change quite a bit.
Yeah, I think if you look at tech and the tech perspective, Germany, for example, I would say is a couple of years behind the US, but not too many. UK might be in between. Netherlands quite early adopter compared, but overall, there might be a little bit of delay, but overall, I think it's probably the same, actually.
So I have a different question, and Scott, you can answer also. But what have been the two hardest things you've had to go through there in terms of scaling a business? And then I'd be curious to Scott to see if you feel that this exact same. So like, what are two things that were like, oh wow, that was really, regardless of what you know about the US?
Yeah, well, I think two things that come to mind. First, one is when I was at Booking Kids, I bought the company from 2 to 5 million, which was mainly exactly when the pandemic started. And our revenues basically went to zero. And we had to make a total pivot within our product, basically, or not in the product, but within our customers, because we were selling tickets at the time. And everybody who was using our ticketing system, like adventure parks, etc., right, they had to close down. But we also knew at one point there's a lot of different providers that need to have ticketing systems, to have name tracing, etc. So we made a total switch within the sales team. And doing that within different markets, meaning you have Italy, France, Germany, that all have different regulations and all have different requirements, and translate that into your messaging, I think was kind of a challenging part. And then, of course, also once the pandemic kind of was slowing down, or in other times we are switching it back to, okay, now we can approach our usual customer base again. And from theory, that all makes sense and is easy, but not to lose your sales team along the way, I think was a challenge, but somehow made it. And I think the second, I mean, if we move from founder sales into repeatable sales motion, there's tons of learnings that I have to do from like that I didn't challenge everything. It's like let's start there, and that's where you should probably start. Don't believe everything that you hear. Your conversion rates will not be 80%. Not every customer is going to stay with you forever because they're also happy. It's the basics. In the end, you have to go down to building a repeatable sales process, which is, I think, learning new things every day.
So Scott,
not the hardest challenge. It's a challenge itself.
Yeah. So Scott, if you think about scaling businesses, because you've grown a couple, what were the two hardest things you faced?
I think the first hardest thing is proving product market fit. Most heads of sales, VPs of sales who go in real early and do the actual 0 to 10 work, if we're being honest, they're going to companies that don't have product market fit yet. And part of your job is to sort of prove that it exists. I'm not saying it's the right way to build a business. I'm just saying it's historically been that way. So that's the number one thing that's hard, because I parachute in. There's no customers. There's no pitch. There's no process. There's nothing. I have to build everything, and then I have to go execute and prove that this thing I just built actually works. And then I can go back to everybody and be like, look, I closed a bunch of customers. There actually is product market fit for this. So that's the number one thing. That's the hardest, for sure.
I'd say I was lucky enough that we had this somehow, at least in the startup where I was recently, that the founders did a pretty good job in defining the problem that we can actually solve, or that our customers could also see the value that we're providing. But overall, bringing them all, narrowing it down to like who are the customers that spend the most, stay the longest, are easy to renew, was probably challenging, because everybody wanted to go. We were selling digital coaching. We all wanted to go for the enterprise. In the end, figuring out, well, that is a motion that we can serve, but it takes ages. Yeah. Mid-market might be our sweet spot. Is probably then the learning. But I fully agree. And you redefine product market fit every single time. Basically, that happens over and over again. It's not like a one-time exercise. Yeah. At least from my experience.
Yeah. You asked me for two things. So after that one, Richard, it's really just it's how do I find other talented people that I can work with and bring on board to build and grow and scale, because I've got to get myself out of this kind of IC/head of sales role. So it's about accumulating talent. It's attracting talent, recruiting talent, onboarding, training that talent, and then showing that other people can execute this plan that you've put in place. And once you've done those two things, you know, you're in pretty good shape. That's what most companies can't get past, those two steps. Let's be honest.
I would agree. I agree.
If you could do those two things, you're in pretty good shape, and you could potentially be on your way. You know, what do you think right now, Chris, is one of the most underrated sort of skill sets that you know, salespeople and sales leaders should be leaning into more, that they're not taking advantage of right now?
I think it's also from my experience, because when you are a new startup, nobody's ever waited for you, right? You can go out, you can send messages as much as you want. Nobody knows you, and nobody's trusting you because inboxes are full anyway. And I think it is the whole topic around getting personalized introductions, getting referrals. This is what helped me all the time since I'm in sales, to build pipeline and to build enough pipeline without spending hours and hours and hours in I say drafting prospecting messages. And yeah, so I think that's the most underrated skill. And I think it's especially for sales reps that struggle to build pipeline, the number one leverage and the immediate action everybody should take. I
fully support this. As you know, I've been talking about it and writing about it for a long time. So I guess that begs the question, why are people not leaning into it? And then what is like one specific action you could encourage people to take to begin that process today that doesn't overwhelm them? Yeah, I think it's the question that I also thought about a lot, is because there's, I think, multiple levels on different people, from awareness, like knowing when you're very early in your career that you could actually ask for referrals. I mean, it should be eye-opening once somebody comes to you, it's like, hey, I heard heard from you to refer, right? Because then everybody's like, oh. But I think it's being afraid to ask, because I think many salespeople still feel like they're asking for a deal. You know, they're not communicating on eye-level. Customers, we're doing our customer a favor. So they are doing us a favor when they sign. So I think that kind of mindset is still very present. I think it's knowledge, how to. Very simple, like knowing when to ask, how to ask, whom to ask for, and also stay in control. And then I'd be curious to hear your take on it, because I know you have a different mindset, but I think it's a leadership topic. And very simple saying why, because today's leaders did grow up in a sales world where referrals were nice to have. And what we did at the time was we did more of everything, more dials, more mails, and that somehow worked to scale a business. And I'm not saying it still works somehow, but we're kind of closing our eyes, looking left and right, that it's not working as well anymore. But we're also afraid to taking new initiative because we might closing down something that's still working. And then when you're not on VP level, even then you have a CEO in your back, or investors or in your back that still have an interest in, well, why don't we keep dials up, right? And you have to transform a whole organization to that mindset of, okay, let's actually build a customer first organization that is actually referring us and helping us expand. How do you see it, now that you build like a couple of companies? Well, I agree with what you just said. I think that people are willing to try it, and then if it doesn't work immediately, they're abandoning ship really, really fast and going back to what works. It's like they're scared to come outside. They step outside, it's too cold, and they run back inside real quick, right? You would never go make a few cold calls, not close a deal, and then just give up on cold calling as like a channel. You'd never send a few emails and then be like, email doesn't work. So I've never understood why people will dabble and try to do a referral thing like once, and it doesn't get the results they're looking for, and then they just abandon it. So it just seems like it has not gotten the sophistication and the process and the volume that these other channels have. And I think, I think a lot of people that are in leadership roles right now didn't come up through the game utilizing these skill sets, knowing how to do this. So if they don't know how to do it, they don't know how to teach it, and they're a little bit lazy and unwilling to learn something new and ask people to do something that they've never figured out themselves. So I think there's There's just a lot of reluctance. I don't think the sales reps are as reluctant as the leaders are. Go ahead,
No,
Richard.
I think.
No, go ahead, Chris.
I may add one thought. I think it's funny, right? Because nowadays, I think referrals are much more common than cold calls. And of course, they are more effective, that putting aside. But, you know, I think 84% of B2B purchase decisions, I read that statistic, start with a referral nowadays. Like, how many start with a cold call? I mean, you can still pick up the phone and call people. You should, but do your research, get a connection. You know, it's much easier to connect on the phone and say, hey, supposed to say hi from Richard. How have you been? And then you enter the conversation. Then just calling them out of the blue when they don't want to, and it's much harder for them to, much harder for us to get them on the phone anyways.
So let's say you've got a team, because like Scott loves to talk strategic and tactical, and I really dig into tactical. Let's say you have a client, right? And you're building their sales playbook, because that's what you do in general. Mm-hmm. What are you teaching a rep to actually say, right? And I guess even before I answer that question, how soon after you close a deal do you ask for the referral? Can you ask for a referral before you close the deal? And then how do you ask for that? Because I think those are the unknown, like everything else in sales, we fear the unknown. Therefore, we're afraid it's going to blow up in our face, or we're going to annoy our prospects or customers. So let's shed some light on that.
Yes. So first question, how much after you close the deal? The question is that the only point where you should actually ask for a referral? I mean,
yes, I don't know.
Look at from my perspective, look at the whole customer journey, right? How many do you actually win of the people that enter your sales process? Like, what's the average right now? Is it like, I've seen companies for 10%, I've seen good companies for 25, the very good ones get to 40. I don't know, but you're missing out on 60% or up to 90% of potential people who might have a very good customer experience, but for whatever reason cannot purchase. And that's just the business side of people entering your deal. How many people do you know in your business network that will never become your customer? Or do you have in your personal network that are able to support you? So don't get me wrong, customers are super important because they experience your product firsthand and they're a very credible source. However, there are so many more people that can actually support you. And I think that's critical when we speak about timing. And that's the one thing. The second is, and then we can go to the how. I think you can ask people within the sales process, and you can ask people after the sales process once they're customers. It's actually a great indicator if you ask them during the sales process and they make you referral, because they're much more likely to buy. Very simple.
So when do you do that?
They're willing to make you a referral.
Yeah, when do you do that though? Because that feels very out of sync to the way I think a human being thinks.
I mean, what I do generally is I try to leverage every moment of excitement on the one side, and I try to be as prepared as I can. What do I mean with that? When I, for example, am a discovery and we talk about decision criteria, I am curious how my customer is generally connected within his industry. I mean, HR people, no HR people, VP sales, no VP sales. There's so many communities out there, right? I try to understand how they make a decision, who they're connected to, who they speak those things, who they speak about those things to, how others in their community might be solving challenges like this. So that already helps me to know and to understand who they actually know, who they might be connected to, who I might be asking for. And very precisely, I don't always ask for a referral during the sales process. But when I know, for example, Richard, you are connected to Scott, and I saw Scott might have a particular challenge for whatever reason, I might ask if I can say hi from you. And I think that's where I make a difference. I might not always ask for an intro. An intro is stronger, but I try to validate how strong our relationship is. And if it's something where I can ask you for the intro, so the text is the same, right? If we make a tactical, hey, Richard, so you're connected to Scott, or you mentioned you're connected to Scott. I saw he was in a podcast talking about ABC, mentioning challenge X that I think I can help him solve. And then it's just two different questions. Might introducing me, or mind if I say hi?
What's in it for them? What is the standard what's in it for them in Germany or over in Europe? Because in America, in North
I
America
knew
at
that
least,
question.
like, yeah, in North America at least, it's like I think people are kind of done doing that out of the kindness of their heart, and they realize that their network um, is valuable, right? And they've realized that there's a way to do this at scale and earn from it. So
Okay, different
in
case.
North America, you're getting like 10 to 20% of first year's revenue on the
Yeah,
closed deal that you introduced.
but
Is it the
but, but
same?
let's distinguish the cases, right? What you're saying about is you are in basically institutional referral giver. You're selling your network in that case, which is totally fine. And I think if someone puts in effort, what you also say in your go to network playbook, which is pretty good, right? Hey, this is how you set it up. Send over a list to the advisors, give them 10 to 20%. It's totally fine. They might work through, oh, this person I know, this person I know, those I don't know. That's a different story if they really put in effort. But if we have a genuine connection, and I know you know someone that might be able to, and what I bring to the party is something valuable for them. I think I can build on that relationship usually to get an introduction. I'm not asking for an intro for 15 people or 20 people. It's just one. I think that's a different story.
Yeah.
Um,
I guess it depends how often you're asking.
yeah, fair.
Who you're
And
asking from. Like we know each other. So if you're like, hey, I'd love to talk to Richard. Okay, fine. Right.
yeah,
But if you're coming back and you're saying, hey, I want to talk to any of these people over here, can you help me? And I'm like, well, what do you want to talk to
and
them about? And you're like, well, they're prospects of mine or whatever. Like, I'm probably not doing that for free.
that's fair. And I think actually
But I
that
guess
is a fair
my
ask.
question is that a different mindset in Germany and Europe versus the US?
Uh, well, maybe a little, maybe not as harsh as you just say it. However, I fully agree that it's a fair question to ask, and I'm also getting referral fees for things that I've connected, and I think
Yeah.
it's a fair game because I like the thing that drives me. I mean, we spoke about this, right? The thing that drives me sane is, oh yeah, I might like Trade Republic, which is like I think trading platform. They're always sending this email, hey, refer a friend, right? You get $20 that you can spend on our platform. Like what? It's ridiculous amount of money to me opening up my network. So if you open up your wallet, then make it substantial
Yeah.
or make it count. So for example, what I love doing much more is giving someone an experience than just pure money. But
Yeah.
I think that's a different
Yeah, for
story.
sure. Listen, you give me, 2 tickets to the Berlin match, and I'll help. That's an experience. I don't need the cash. I'll go to the football match. I would love that.
See,
But
and that's also
senior level
yeah,
people who can make senior level introductions that most people want
yeah,
demand or need like senior level compensation or experiences. To your point,
sure.
like what is a
I
$20 gift card for me? What is a $5
yeah,
coffee? Like that's nothing,
exactly.
you know? Right?
No, so I fully agree. That's what I was saying. When you open your wallet, then spend big money because I know what your customer acquisition cost usually is, and I know what it is worth if you get a hold in front of the right people. I'm just saying that I would probably not do it for one person, if for one introduction, usually, unless they ask. But if I wanna, let's say, institutionalize that somehow, what I'm also doing with, I mean, you spoke about this with advisors, for example, of your company. Fair enough, of course. I mean, like, I love using a helicopter to go on top of the mountain. It's like, I better be prepared and do my research because, I mean, let's face it, an introduction can bring you to the party, but it doesn't make the party fun if you don't really bring.
That's true.
No,
That's
but you
true.
have to, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's one of the
Yeah.
most common mistakes to say, oh, I know someone who might be doing the intro. Yeah, well, did you do your research? What are you going to talk about? Like, you cannot go to
The
a C-level
person just
executive.
assumes, the person assumes because you made an intro that person is just going to buy your product straight
Exactly,
away
but
without,
still be relevant, and then
yeah.
like it's opening the door. That's like one of the most common mistakes is aim too high without doing your job. Like do your research. I mean, you do it anyways. When you craft a cold message, the only difference is then you spend, I don't know, sending 20 touch points, customizing each step for like 5 minutes, and I spend 2 hours. Versus I send an email. maybe a phone call and get a response rate of 80% after 3 touch points. It's like, you can choose which way you go, but you have to do the work anyways.
So,
and I get a meeting and you most likely don't.
Yeah. So, why do you think executives are so reluctant? Right? If I work for Scott and Scott's my CEO and Scott's got 10 salespeople, all 10 people go to him and say, Scott, can you intro this person, this person, this person, this person? And it's not the Scott Leese we all know and love. It's bizarro world, Scott. Why is that type of person so reluctant to help their sales team? Do they feel like they're intruding on friends? Do they feel like it's almost like they're beginning SDRs and they don't know how to make a fucking cold call?
Do they?
I don't know. But I'm curious to Chris's point, just because he talks about it and teaches on it so much.
Maybe I missed the point. Who's reluctant on
the executive, right? The executive.
Yeah.
I go work for someone like Scott, who's a CEO, and Scott knows a ton of people. Yeah. Why is Scott reluctant? What are you seeing that Scott is reluctant about across the board? Are they embarrassed to do it? They feel like they're being annoying? Like
meaning making an intro?
Yeah.
Well, I think.
Or do you think, or maybe the better question is actually the executives don't mind doing it. Salespeople are afraid to ask the executive.
So that's the first thing salespeople are afraid to ask. I think there's a statistic which I like to quote because it's pretty remarkable that 91% of sales of customers would give a referral, and only 11% of salespeople ask for it. So that's the number one statistic that is coming from, I think, Dale Carnegie. I always pull that up because it shows the gap that we have. And then we know referrals are happening anyways, right? We're living in a referral society. We're giving referrals every day if we look at our private life. So, and so the way we buy, I don't know, experiences like going to the cinema, I ask you if I know, or if I go to Costa Rica, I might ask Scott for a referral, a recommendation because he has been there.
Well, who the fuck am I? I've been there.
Sorry, apologies. No, but it's the same way we purchase software, right? We look for people that we know had the same problem. And I think, so nobody's afraid to make the introduction. I think the main mistake, if we ask people, is making it not about the customer or at least about the person making the referral. I mean, if I say, hi, Richard, I want to speak to Scott. Can you make an intro? You'd be like, yeah, no, why? Like, you also care about your network. But if I bring value to you or to Scott, it's like, hey, this is why it's important. That's why I have to speak with him. I think you're much less reluctant to make that intro. You might still question if that's valuable. You might go to ask Scott, hey, Scott, talk to Chris. He wants to talk to you about ABC because of reason why. Do you want to talk to him?
Yeah.
And I think that is probably the main mistake. The other one is, people are afraid to ask, especially if it comes to senior executives.
The fear factor is so interesting because people are doing much harder, scarier things all day long when they're selling and prospecting than asking somebody for a referral or asking somebody for an intro or a connection or whatever. But that is far less intimidating than, handing somebody a list of 100 phone numbers and say, call these 100 strangers. People have no problem doing that. It's very strange. We might need to reevaluate where some of that fear comes from. We're starting to get towards the end of the show, and so we got to shout out our sponsors one more time. It's Tech Sales Accelerator. Get your first job in tech, SDR role, land it. Tech Sales Accelerator helps you with some coursework that gives you the framework to succeed and peel. Richard.
Yes. So Scott, just out of curiosity, in your CRM, what percentage of people in your CRM do you think are not contacted?
0.
Okay. What do you think about in a real CRM, which is a joke because Scott doesn't have a CRM. He has an Excel sheet.
That's why I said 0.
Yeah. I know. So in a real CRM, what percentage do you think it is who are never contacted?
Who are never contacted? 15%.
Data says it's close to 90.
90% are never contacted?
Because so many things are added that nobody ever goes back, which kind of goes back to this referral thing. Like, who are these people in my database, and why am I not just trying to have a piece of communication with them? Which is one of the reasons we're talking about Peel, get Peel.ai. They help you figure that out, and then help you figure out how to actually message them in a meaningful way. So please check out our sponsor, get Peel.ai. We'll go from there. But flipping it back over to Chris. Chris, this is the part of the conversation where you can ask us questions. And certainly you can ask Scott all you want about Costa Rica. Don't bother asking me.
No worries. No, I thought about this, and I think there's two topics that I'm curious about. But one in particular is, we always see people on LinkedIn, and of course, most of you have an incredible track record in training salespeople and building sales organizations. But I'd also be curious how you educate yourself, and what your, let's say, basically team looks like, that you might have in the background that's supporting you. Do you work with coaches? Do you have mentors? People that you discuss challenges with. Very curious to know that.
It's a good question. Richard has a much larger team, if you will, than I do. I have one full-time employee. That's it. In my main consulting business, in our surf and sales business, it's me, Richard, and our friend Jeff. I don't have a EA, a VA, anything like that. I don't have like teams that I work with. I don't have a formal coach of any kind or sort, but I have loads of people that I have conversations with every day that are, peers of mine, or people who are doing better than me, that I'm able to interact with and get advice from. Richard and I will message each other, for example, and say, I don't know, my business is failing. What am I supposed to do? And then one of us will give the other one advice.
Yeah.
Right. Or Richard will call me and be like, I need your advice on XYZ. How do I deal with this? So, and we have, presumably Richard does too, but I have, a dozen or more of those kind of relationships in place. So I've never really felt the need or urgency to get a formal kind of coach in place. Doesn't mean it wouldn't be a good idea. I just have never done it. Richard?
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I think, I sort of call it like a board of directors, right? Like, I've got this board of directors, and some of them are in my personal life around mental health. Some are in my financial life around financial advisory. Some are around like Scott and some of our other friends and peers in the business world, where, I'll reach out to them. How would you handle this? How would you price this? Like, sometimes someone asks me for something unique. Scott and I will go, well, how would you price this? Or how do you price this? Because we do stuff a little differently from each other. And then I have one formal mentor that I got back in 2020 during COVID, and everything for my business shifted from going out and about to being, on Zoom. And so I called a former client who who'd hired me twice. And I asked him if I formally asked him to be my mentor. And I formally asked him, I said, great, what do you charge for it? Because I think if you ask someone to be a mentor, to your point, Chris, you have to make it worth their while. And Alan was so kind, and he's like, I'm not going to charge you anything. I've known you forever. I love talking to you and, bouncing business ideas. And, a couple of times he said, well, you know what? Why don't you just come in and do some lunch and learns for my team? I'm like, I can fucking do that. Like, that's nothing for me. Right. And he helped me rebuild my business based on COVID, and he's still helping me. He's been in security all this time. I just had to go do all my stupid, cybersecurity insurance. I'm like, what does this mean, Alan? I have no idea what these, do I have this or do I need that? He's like, dude, you're a sole proprietor. You don't need it. So I've had that one formal mentor. I will say this to people. I resisted having a formal mentor. People for decades told me to get one. And I thought I was smart enough to figure it out by myself, or I would call people like Scott for advice. And there's a very big difference between a mentor-mentee relationship and someone you can call for advice. And my advice to everybody is, don't be afraid to ask for a formal mentor. It's just like asking for a referral. Like, it really is the same fear for me. It was like, I don't know. And you'd be surprised how many people will say yes. And you can just say, look, I want to ask you something that's serious. I want it to be a formal thing. And if you don't have time, it's okay. You won't upset me. You won't offend me. So you give them the out. And the times I've done it, nobody's ever said no. Some have said, I can't do it formally, but I'll take some calls from you. I'm like, okay. So I knew not. But then for Alan, we set up every other week phone calls. So, and we still have them to this day, 5 years later. So that's my whole piece on that mentor piece. So you got to find what works for you, though.
Nice. Thanks.
Yeah.
Cool.
As usual, Richard and I have different perspectives, different ways of trying to arrive at the same destination.
Yeah.
There's no one way that works, right?
No, mine are all related to daddy issues. I need a daddy. Back to Chris's comment about my mental health. I know where my problems stem from.
There you go. Right. There we go. Chris, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you and learn a little bit more about what you're up to and perhaps work with you?
I'm on LinkedIn, Christoph Karger. I think that's the most easy way to get in touch. Just connect, send me a message. I love to have conversations around sales, go-to-market, different challenges. I talk a lot about and also teach sales teams how to really generate referrals and make it actionable. So I think I said LinkedIn is the most easy way. And if you're German speaking, I have a little podcast project as well, which is called Go to Network Podcast, which is about future of sales, especially I believe, a fundamental belief that your network should be part of your go-to-market strategy. So if you're German speaking, give it a listen. If you're English speaking, learn German, give it a listen. And,
I was going to say, where's the AI tool that can convert all of our podcasts to every lange? Maybe that's our
so great. He just made me lose my headset.
It's actually existing already. I think.
Does it?
I think I saw something about it that you can record videos and podcast episodes basically just by translating the transcript, and it will convert that into your voice. It's
there you go, Richard. Go down the rabbit hole, Richard.
I'm like, Scott, there's your new project. Because I know Scott will definitely get all over it.
I'd love to listen to Seven Sales in Spanish, so let's go.
Oh, that's so funny. All right, Chris, appreciate you spending some time with us, man. Keep up the good work over there. Keep preaching the referral stuff. I'm a big believer in it, as you know, and hopefully we get to see you in Costa Rica one day soon at Surf and Sales. So until next time, everybody, that's it for us from the Surf and Sales podcast. See you next time.